You're listening to the Be Better Off Show by Kelly+Partners.
Welcome to the Be Better Off Show, where we find great Australians who are innovating, doing interesting things, and who can share their ideas to help you be healthier, wealthier, and wiser. And today, we've got Angus Kennard, who's the co-founder and co-CEO of Inauro, which is a fantastic new startup business that he's developing. I first met Angus many years ago when he was working in the Kennards Hire business, running out a fantastic culture program that I'd been put on to a friend of mine. And he'd had a very interesting career there. And I thought the program was certainly the best of its kind that I had seen anywhere. So I connected with Angus, and he very generously shared what they were doing within what is a large business to further reinforce and enhance the culture of that business. So I want to say welcome, Angus.
Thanks, Brett. Great to be here.
Mate, when we first caught up, and you know, I've got in terms of your background that you joined the family business as a franchisee and then went on to be the MD of Concrete Care and non-exec director, exec director, and CEO from October 16 to July 2020. But before we get to that, you were born and grew up in Sydney, bunch of siblings. How did you, what did you do post school, and how did you move your career forward?
Yeah, post school, went to university, did a Bachelor of Business, then did a year away travelling, and then sort of came back and learnt the School of Hard Knocks. I was selling advertising space in magazines via the phone. So that was a good start to a few School of Hard Knocks, and then getting into selling photocopiers and forklifts. So I was outside the family business for over 5 years before coming in at the grassroots.
There's a terrific book that I'd certainly recommend. I'm sure many people listening to the podcast have read Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki, but he makes the point in that book, which I always thought was excellent, that if you could give a young person anything, it would be the ability to sell, and that sales training just matters no matter what industry you're in, because you're always selling yourself. So what did you learn in terms of phone-based selling, face-to-face selling of copiers and forklifts? What did you learn out of that?
The best sales guys that I've seen are the ones that listen, not the ones that talk. So it's really trying to listen and understand what your customer's wanting, and then trying to effectively meet those needs and communicate those needs. And as you go through a sales process, it should really naturally evolve into actually what is the right decision. And so I think that's the skill that I learned, is how do you bring people along, get them to a point where they know that the decision they're making is the right decision.
Yeah, very, very interesting. And so in terms of those early, 5 years of selling, was it a process that you immediately, I guess, learn to listen to that customer, or did you have a good sales mentor? Or because it's a really great insight, where did that come from?
I think you get pretty hard-skinned cold calling and knocking on doors. So then what it becomes is, what is your first impression? What are your first words that are going to engage someone and want to listen to what the idea that potentially you're going to talk to them about? And you get a lot of knockbacks. No one gets too excited about photocopiers. Well, not the people that I've learnt or that I want to hang around with necessarily. But so it took a bit of a skill just to sort of learn and understand that. And really sort of the perseverance aspect is probably the main thing that I learned, is that no is not necessarily always a no. And it's really trying to understand what is it, the real need that sits behind that, and trying to tap into that.
So it's a really tremendous experience for a young person to have. How, and for many of our listeners are people that own family businesses, and I'm very often asked, Angus, what do we do with the kids? Do we bring them straight into the business? Do we let them go out to another business? What was your dad's mindset or your mum's mindset around, go and get a job outside the family business, get some skills? Did they direct you into a selling type role, or what was the counsel?
it wasn't necessarily directed into that role. It was directed into something that wasn't the family business. I've always said that, anyone who wants to come into the family business has that opportunity, but you've got to bring something to that. And so what that meant is that we had to spend a minimum of 5 years outside, being hired by someone, I never got fired, but being fired by someone, having to promote yourself, having to achieve your own results off your own bat. And I think, one of the sort of the sayings that I have is that the harder you work, the luckier you get. And I remember growing up when I was young, our parents always taught us the value of hard work and the money and the results and whatever came from that. And even as a young person, we used to package up items that they used to sell within the business. So things like, nails or ropes and we'd get up and we'd get paid per product. And we actually used to even bundle up explosive charges, and you probably wouldn't get away with that these days when you're sort of a 12-year-old. And anyway, we kept all our fingers, and that was a good thing. But I think that value of hard work was instilled into us at an early age, and I guess understanding the benefits of that hard work, not just financial, but how you feel about yourself and the self-respect and all those things that come with work. So that was sort of, I guess, the grounding that our parents instilled into us.
I do the podcast, Angus, because I love to learn. And I always think that there's, I say that if you listen to somebody, you always get something from the experience. But, we've already passed that threshold within the first 5 minutes because, this idea of reward for effort, that if you really make an effort, all I want our kids to know is that if you do work really hard and you really do the best you can, then it's likely that you'll get rewards. But those first rewards will be the self-respect of knowing that you've done the best you possibly could, and then trying to give them the confidence that, it's likely that will be good enough, if you like, over time. So that's such a great insight, and I appreciate you sharing that. And I do think it's hard for parents when there's an obvious thing to give the kids to do, to send them outside the business and say, go and make yourself useful and come back when you've got something to bring. So you come back to the family business, and that's obviously always a little bit of fun. And,
more than a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. And look, I say, founders of businesses who've been effective at building them are normally different to the average bear. But can you explain a little bit about how you integrated into the business, whether you were recruited in the same way anyone else would be, put into a role, managed, how a family charter works, just briefly how you guys were running that family business for a family member coming through?
So I had the opportunity. There was we had one franchise, and that franchise happened to be with a partnership with my father and a guy by the name of Grant, who used to run the business. And there was sort of an opportunity. He wanted to sort of make his own thing and do his own thing. And so he took a franchise down at our Brookvale branch, and he was looking for someone that he could develop into a manager. And there was an opportunity that if I wanted to go and really understand the nuts and bolts of the business, because this guy was probably one of the best operators, it was a really good opportunity for me to come in and work from that level. And, coming in as the boss's son, it's never easy. And what it means is that you've got to work harder, be better, so much more than everyone else to be able to earn your stripes, to prove that actually when you get to that point or you get a promotion, that actually you're the one that's earned it and you're the one that's most deserving of that. And there's always a little bit of that, it just took a little bit of that and to sort of get the runs on the board for me to have that credibility and that respect. In the end, I worked with him for about 7 years. I ended up buying my father out in that franchise, and we took on another branch on the Northern Beaches, and they were probably the two best performing branches in the network from a financial and other points of view. And I guess I had this sort of 7-year itch that after 7 years, I was a bit bored. I was living on the Northern Beaches. I could have cruised in, things were doing pretty well, but I I'd sort of run out of things that I wanted to do. And so that's when I sort of did a bit of research and came up, and it's sort of the whole specialist business concept came out from that, where in the US we could see all this amazing equipment working in concrete. And concrete's the second most used resource in the world to water. It's hard to work with, and there was a real trend to using concrete as a finished surface. So you see polished concrete floors and the like, and that industrial sort of look. So did some research and thought that actually that'd be a business that I'd like to start. So I started a specialist business within Kennards in partnership with them, and grew that up to a national business. And after 7 years, I got that same itch again and sort of sold that back. Had a year off, went travelling for a year, and then with the family, and then sort of came back, did some roles before doing an MBA, and then stepping into the CEO role for 3.5 years or so.
In terms of the family, you got the dad on the board, you're the CEO. It's hard enough for CEOs generally reporting to a board. The tenure of an average public company CEO is 3 years in Australia, a little bit longer in the US. How did you find that from a personal, back to those ideas of personal satisfaction and how you felt about yourself doing that?
Yeah, well, my dad actually wasn't on the board. I got on the board in 2005 and he stepped off in 2007.
Yeah.
And so there was me and normally other family members, and being on the board or running the business and having other family members on the board can be complicated, and having a major shareholder that is not on the board but doesn't always agree can be complicated.
Yeah.
I actually found the business side of it probably the easiest side, the family side of it. And I think in every family business has their own challenges, because it's not about the logic and the reasoning, it's actually about the emotion. And it's a really hard thing to tackle at times. And I think, my family's always acted, I think, with the right intent. But in that role, I sort of grew the business for about 48% in the time I was there. We talked about that culture program. Our staff engagement went up and recognised as one of the top 10 in Australia and New Zealand, improved our safety, customer satisfaction went up, and introduced a number of innovative programs in the business, one of which I sort of wanted to, I guess the reason why I sort of stepped out in the end. But so I think it does pose its challenges. I mean, I think one around family businesses, there's a lot of energy around it, and sometimes it can be really good energy, and sometimes it can be challenging energy. And I think any family member that's working in a family business, they'd be lying if they said they didn't have that.
Yeah. So then you have this idea. I know we caught up, had a beer, and then you mentioned that you'd started Inauro. You had this idea. You shared with me that Inauro means to enrich in Latin. How do you go from, CEO of a large family business to an empty office, which is a thrilling and scary experience, as I know myself, and you've got your concept, your idea, developing it up. Tell us a little bit, or share with us a little bit about that startup.
Yeah.
Idea to action.
Yeah, well, the difference, I guess, running a business with 1,700 people across Australia and New Zealand to then setting up a business that you've only got a few, and now I think we've got 14 people working in the business. The levels of autonomy are quite different, and I think for me it's always about backing yourself with an idea and passionately working hard to execute on that idea. So we built this platform within Kennards that was a telemetry type platform. So it looked at it from an asset point of view. You'd put an Internet of Things or IoT device on a bit of equipment. So this would then, if you had, say, a vehicle, it would plug into the vehicle. It had a SIM card as an example of communication. It would be pulling the data back, all the information off around that vehicle, how it was driving, how it was speeding, what the fuel levels were, where the hours were. And so we looked at it like as how do you manage equipment better, thinking about it in a vertical. And the reason why we set our own platform up is that many companies are actually building these as part of their within the factory. Some are doing it, some aren't. When you've got a mixed fleet across a number of different range of not only brands but types of equipment, you've got different ages of equipment. There was no platform out there that would actually enable us to do that, and so we set on a journey of building that ourselves, and that was a really successful platform in the sense that it added a lot of value to our customers. And I sort of saw the opportunity that actually had a much wider application, not only in construction and rental, but in so many other industries. And so I sort of left with the idea that maybe I might sort of take that platform and continue it on. In the end, the family wanted to hang on to that platform themselves, and I thought, well, I still think there's an opportunity. So I left the business and I actually rebuilt this platform in a much more modular way with our team. And given that technology evolves so quickly over time and it sits in Microsoft Azure, there were so many other features that came in within that 3-year period that have made it a lot more effective and a lot quicker to actually build it a second time.
And cheaper.
And it made the platform a lot faster in how we built it. It unlocked a lot more features, and it had a much wider application in the type of businesses that we could actually go and talk to. And so here we are now, what are we, 10 months or 11 months into that business. We've been able to get this platform up and running really quickly. We've been able to put customers on there, paying customers. And it's been really exciting, working with some really great people, being able to dynamically pivot, as they say, into something that's different, being able to really focus on what the customers want, and really be able to build a culture that we wanted to work in and that we wanted our people to live by, which is easy to sort of do that from scratch.
Yeah.
So it's been a lot of fun, and I think it's heading in the right direction. We've had really good feedback. No one's kicked us out of their office yet, so that's a good sign. And we see a much wider application in lots of different industries, and we've got poultry processing, we've got agriculture, refrigerated transport, construction, equipment rental. We've had some inquiries about marine. We're probably not going to spend too much time on that, but there's a whole range of things like facilities management and the like, which actually enables an operation to be able to operate with increased safety, efficiency, and environmental performance in real time. So it's not looking back about what happened, 2 days ago, a week ago, or a month ago, thinking about it from a BI perspective. Actually, it's about, what do I need to know now? What are the risks that I need to be aware of in my operation? And what do I need to focus on?
I always think the circle of life is interesting, Angus. So you're back to selling, not quite cold calling about photocopiers, but those ideas of turning up, listening to what that particular customer is experiencing and trying to solve. And then with technology, I guess the exciting thing is the ability to use technology to really shape a solution that makes a material difference. It is interesting, you mentioned how much technology has moved in that time. When you look out 5 years or 10 years, where do you want this business to be? What do you want the culture to be like? Do you want it to be here? Do you believe you can scale it around the world? What's the vision?
We sort of see ourselves participating in an ecosystem. We're going to be one component of a solution, and we're going to have partners that we work with to actually solve that solution. There's that co-opetition in some ways. You might be solving one piece of it, you might be solving multiple pieces of it. And it's really about trying to work out who are the right people to be able to solve the solution in the right way. One of the problems that we've observed with technology is that a lot of these things often sit in a pilot form. So they start something and it sits in a pilot and it sits in its own silo. And actually, they don't really get the real benefit from that. And how we look at it is, how do you bring all that together to be able to operate in real time? So, there's multiple systems. there's multiple applications. How do you bring all that together into one? I think it's a bit corny, the single pane of glass, but how do you bring it all together in one? And that's what we're trying to solve, is bring all that together so people can actually, log into one system. They don't want to log into 20, because as soon as they've got to log into probably more than 2, these things fail and it's just too hard.
Yeah, so it is a big opportunity, but it's one of those exercises in trying to make it as simple for people to use as possible. I guess technology has got people focused more than ever on what's become, I guess, broadly known as user experience, which I think is a great thing for people to think about in every type of business. But how do you, have you got this theory to sort of 2 clicks to a solution, or, how do you think about the user experience that you need to make this relevant to your end customer?
Yeah, so when you think about telemetry platforms, they show you a dot on a map, and no one's job is to look at a dot on a map.
Yeah.
So how we sort of see it is that there's a lot of this stuff that should be going on in the background. All you want to be notified is there's something that's a bit out of whack or a bit out of range. And so the first stage in most of these operations is awareness. So what do I need to know and be aware of? Then you think about suggestion. So what then should I do? And then you think about control and automation, is that what can I then automate through automatic workflows that I actually don't even have to worry about? An example of that would be, so if you think about, an example would be, say, one of the largest supermarkets, and they've got fridges. You think about how many stores they've got, how many fridges they've got, and the rule of thumb is that you've got to scan that fridge, I think it's every 2 or 3 hours for food standards, to make sure it's below a certain temperature. And then if it's above that, you've got to do something about it. But you think about how many times people do that, probably within that cadence, it's 2 or 3%. People don't do it within that. And so therefore either time goes on or something happens. And then there's that scramble, that urgent scramble to try and fix something, or they end up throwing out food.
Yeah, the risk.
But if you could put a simple device in there that would actually set the temperature every minute, it could, devices can be light sensitive, that if the door opens or something changes, you can sense all this. You can tell if the compressor's working harder. Then someone actually doesn't have to manage that. All they need to do is be alerted to that if something changes. And then there might be a remedy action that comes from that, and you can digitize that process as well. But also then you could automate that to then suddenly you're sending a text or a notification to your facilities management, who are then coming in fixing the problem without you actually really having to do much or do anything.
Yeah.
And so you think about, from an efficiency point of view, there's efficiency from a food safety point of view, and also from an environmental point of view.
And even just from a records point of view, that's all digitally recorded, the decision path, the action that's taken, who attended to it, what the result was.
So many workflows sit on a piece of paper.
Yep.
And trying to raise people up into digitising a lot of those forms or a lot of the ways of working, then you can actually, feed that into, you don't have to hand a book of paper over to someone. You can actually then automate some of those workflows. And I think the opportunity around digitisation is huge. They talk about Industry 4.0, which is that end-to-end digitisation process. If you look at construction, it's one of the least digitised industries. And they talk about, the improvement, they're talking about somewhere between 2 and 6% gross margin in construction. And there's opportunities from 13 to 21%, according to McKinsey, around the opportunities as far as improvement on margin. So you think about where that opportunity sits, certainly around construction, and the emergence of AI is actually going to really enable a lot of that, because it's not like a factory where you're doing a multitude of the single task.
Yeah.
When you've got indiscriminate work, like you have on a construction site, where you've got all these different data points, AI is going to enable how you can think about it, how you can work better, to be able to become a lot more efficient. And there's all these emerging technologies that are using that, and then we see ourselves having to work ourselves within that, looking at visual technology, where they're looking at from a crane, seeing how the way of work is working and using algorithms to then look at those data points and improve efficiency. You're looking at how does things, how does the whole supply chain come on site?
Yeah.
And you think about, so you're connecting a site to the supply chain to the materials or resources, and how do all those things then work together on a site to make it more efficient?
And if you get even, as you say, if you can get a marginal improvement, given the number of steps and the complexity, then the savings are, I suspect, dramatic. It's quite interesting when you mention there, Angus, industry sort of 4.0 end-to-end digitisation. I think for all of the people listening to our podcast today, thinking about their business and thinking about, what is the beginning and end of at least an iteration of the customer experience with their business, and how digitised is it? I remember many years ago, at least I think it was in 2012, I interviewed Mike Cannon-Brooks, who was not well known at the time, who was building Atlassian, and he said to me that, every business in the future is a software business. And so, that's nearly 10 years later. I think that's more prescient than ever around thinking about, what is the end-to-end digital experience for your customer. And not that takes away the role of human interaction. In my mind, it just makes a higher quality human interaction based on more rational data and better insight.
Yeah, I think you're spot on there. I also think how the adoption gets adopted is actually, don't change the way they work. Just try and make the work that they do easier, and digitise and simplify and speed up some of those processes. Yep. And that's when you get an easier adoption curve, and then it expands out from there.
Yeah, very cool. And I do think about your business in that respect. Angus, a leading VC said to me that if you look at the software companies that have been very successful, it is really they've been able to scale from an ease of first adoption. And so people could sign up to their platform. If you think of your Facebooks, your Instagrams, it was easy to sign up. It was not necessarily a product that did everything at first, but it did something that was valuable to the customer. And over time, they built an ecosystem informed by the customer, and really this rigor around, I guess, design being a manifestation of simplicity. I think for all of us, it's something to very much reflect on. So to your vision, your 5-year vision, your 10-year vision, if this business becomes what you want it to be, does it become a global business? Is it a private company, a public company? Is it employee-led, customer, focused? What is Inauro, in its, I hesitate to use the word maturity when it comes to technology, but as it becomes a young adult?
Yeah, one of our mantras and our values is solve for the customer. So that's really what we're trying to do, is solve that for the customer. And we know that with our Perspio platform, there's going to be people that can just get on and use it straight away. And there's going to be people that actually have to lift their elements of their operations up to that point. And that's where Inauro comes in to be able to help them to do that. We see ourselves as the opportunity to, be a global business. As far as the ownership goes, whatever the right ownership is to be able to enable that, to be able to deliver a great company is really what we're open to. And, the team that we've got on board are really open to that. And we're sort of, scrambling and working really hard every day to really try and help all those industries and all those businesses to be able to operate better and think about in terms of how do they digitise and how do they automate and make their business work better in real time.
So that's very, very exciting. For the people listening to our podcast, Angus, shameless plug, who do you want to meet? Who are what type of businesses out there? Are they businesses with plenty of infrastructure, hard assets? Can they use this in a service business? Who do you want to meet?
Well, if anyone has all these systems that are actually hooked in, when I say like you might have telemetry or you might have something within your business, but it doesn't all come together, that's actually a really easy solution for us to be able to get instant return for customers. Alternatively, if there are people that are struggling with how do they digitise how they work, we've got a number of partners that we work with to be able to help with that. And that's where we sort of help in bringing those people up to that level. So it can be really any operation, whether it's in, as I said, if it's in food processing, if it's in logistics, if it's in construction, if it's in any type of asset management, whether it be fixed assets or mobile assets. That's sort of our strong point. That's where we sort of come from. We know that we can help enable that and bring it all together and pass data around to different systems to be able to enable them to work better in real time.
And I guess, one of the questions I've always liked to ask people when I interview them, and in conclusion for today, Angus, a motto, quote, or thought that sort of best summarises your approach to life and or business.
Go hard or go home is sort of one of my mantras, and the thing that I'm most afraid of is not having a go. And yep. I'm not afraid of it not working or something not happening. That's okay, because I think that's where the learning comes from. But to not try and have those regrets that I didn't actually have a crack, that's my biggest fear.
Yeah, that's such a great place to finish. And I want to thank Angus for joining us today. We've put the Be Better Off show together for our business owner clients and friends to be healthier, wealthier, and wiser. And certainly what you've heard today is a great note of wisdom to conclude on, is that, I genuinely believe that there's only one foul emotion in life, and that's regret. And so going hard or going home and making sure you live without regrets is just a great mantra to live by. Angus, I want to thank you so much for joining us today, and I look forward to following the journey and having you back to share more and introducing some of our Kelly+Partners clients and associates to you, so that you can help them on this 4.0 journey to an end-to-end digitisation of their business. Have a great day.
Thanks for listening to the Be Better Off show. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to rate and review on Apple Podcasts.
Have a great day.